fellow developers, writers, and everyone who loves game design.
Welcome to DLC Not Included, our weekly podcast where we discuss game development, the industry, and everything in between.
We are your hosts, Steele
and Teal. Glad you could join us.
So it is fall. It is autumn down here in Texas, and we're currently sitting at a lovely 84 degrees.
Yes, 84 degrees is indeed autumn.
We hope everyone out there is having an absolutely amazing day. Lots of love to our live audience who's listening out there, and love to anyone who's listening to this VOD on Spotify, iTunes, etc., etc. It's going to be a good one today.
Yes, it is.
It's going to be a good one. For all you writers out there, we are going to be this one specifically for you.
So today's topic is writing scenes for your game.
All right, important because as you're developing your game and your narrative, and people are going through the gameplay loop and going through each of your scenes and sequences, you got to have some level of writing, unless it's, even if it's a silent game like Limbo, things happen.
Yes.
But if words are spoken, you're going to have some level of writing.
Right.
And the moment I say that, the dog in our neighbor's backyard let out this deliciously loud howl. So if you heard that, I apologize. Quick disclaimer before we get started: this is not going to be technical. So we're not going to be talking about like the technical side of writing, like
right.
Using a period here, exclamation point, that kind of thing. We're going more over the idea of how to write good scenes for your game.
Yeah. So, but there are a couple of things that you do want to keep in mind before you start writing.
Absolutely. We've, we do the research for this, and we try to take a really complex subject and condense it down to something that fits in an hour or less. So we kind of brought it down to 3 points. We think these are the biggest ones. Yeah,
the most important thing that you need to keep in mind is that the user is part of the experience.
So unlike when you're writing for a book or a movie script or whatnot, where it's very passive, in a video game, the user is actively a part of the experience.
Yep. I was going to say actively engaged, but yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. And we talk about the UX. Well, that user experience part of that is going to be their engagement in your story.
Yeah.
And the journey that you write for your viewer is the same as the journey of the main character, the protagonist.
Right.
So,
because you, as the player, are on the protagonist's journey.
Right. Whatever that may be. It could be a journey of self-discovery. It could be a journey of escape. It could be anything. So if you're playing like a Tomb Raider game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, you're writing Lara Croft's journey as if the player is Lara Croft, even though they're not.
Yeah.
It's not like you're creating your own avatar. It doesn't matter. You have to write the protagonist journey for the player so that they can experience it together. That's very important. Keep that mindset.
And while you're doing that, make sure that you focus on creating empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Between the player and the protagonist.
Yeah, it's very, very important. If the player cannot have an empathic connection to the protagonist in any way, they're going to become disengaged to the story. That's why characters who are all about the violence, like Kratos in the God of War game, you can empathize because of the loss that he suffered at the hands of the gods.
Right.
Going back to Lara Croft, that empathy of exploration or trying to find some sort of Indiana Jones style thing. Whenever you are writing your dialogue and your scenes and your narrative, just remember that there's going to be something flawed and damaged in these characters that we can relate to. Something that is like Kratos. Kratos lost his family.
Yeah.
And that drove him with rage to destroy the gods, Ares and eventually Zeus. So, that's those things that are inside of a person that there's just something bad has happened.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the whole writing tips we used to talk about. Undeserved misfortune, that everyman quirk and pet the dog moment.
Yeah.
Which we should probably go over those real quickly.
Okay.
The undeserved misfortune is something bad that happened to the protagonist that they didn't deserve, which in Kratos' case would be, his family getting killed. The everyman quirk is something that you can directly relate to. And then the pet the dog moment is something that the protagonist does that you would go, hey, I would do that.
Right.
Going up and petting the doggo.
Let's look at the flip side for a moment. The opposite the opposite idea of character empathy, of empathizing with your character, is having a Mary Sue.
Right. Someone who's flawless.
Someone who's flawless, does everything perfectly, everything just works out for them.
Right. You can't relate to that. We can't relate to someone who, a human being cannot form an empathic connection with someone who never has a problem, never has anything wrong with them. A good example of someone who's dangerously close to being a Mary Sue, is Reen from Trails of Cold Steel.
Oh, that's true.
Although he does grow as the story for the first game and the series goes on. At first, he's selfless and he's super selfless. But then, and this is a good turn, that selflessness is actually damaging to him. He's so selfless, he gets hurt because he puts himself in harm's way, almost as if he doesn't care whether he lives or dies. It's really, really well done, but it came very close to that line.
Yeah, I think there was a turning point in that when he got called out.
When he got called out for it, yes. I think he got in the way of like Fee's attack or something, attacking Fee. But the fact of the matter is what we thought was going to be, okay, this character's not relatable, became very relatable. So you as a writer can do that. Just make sure you don't cross that line over into Mary Sue territory.
That's right. And while you're focusing on the empathy, you also want to focus on what is happening in your scene and why is it happening.
Yeah.
So the what and the why.
Very, very, very important, because you have to do more than just create an empathic connection between the player and, between the player and the protagonist. You have to create a connection between the player and the game story.
That's right.
And, statistically speaking, this is actually an old article I found back. CNN wrote it back in 2011.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, statistically, most
10 years ago.
10 years ago, but it holds true. Most players actually don't finish a single-player campaign, and it's usually because of disengagement as to what is happening around them and why.
I can see that.
So as you're writing each of those scenes, what is happening to the protagonist? What is happening to the dertagonist, the tritagonist, the supporting cast? All these characters. Why is it happening?
The player needs to be invested in your game story.
As well as, the why these things are occurring to them.
Yeah.
A good example of something that, is actually done very well is the beginning of Saints Row the Third. You're playing the boss along with your posse, and, you're thinking, okay, just another day. We're just the bad guys just going out robbing banks. And then suddenly a bigger bad comes,
That's right.
captures you guys,
yeah,
kicks y'all's asses. Johnny Gat gets, quote unquote, killed. And the next thing you know, you and Shondi and your friends are trying to escape with their lives. And, then your bank account's drained and you're literally dropped off in Steelport, with nothing. So it was kind of cool to see, just that drop in there. And then for the entirety of this game, all these things that are happening around you are either because your character is causing them or the syndicate is trying to destroy you. And this is a freaking sandbox game.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And its narrative is excellently done. So now that we've kind of gone over this, all of this stuff we just talked about, have that in your head, or have it down on a sheet of paper, a little checklist.
Because you're going to need to refer to that checklist when you start your writing.
Yes. Now what we did was we took this into 2 separate lessons. They are interconnected, and the first one's going to be about creating cutscenes, while the second lesson is going to be about in-play scenes. The difference is a cutscene is a linear, non-branching moment. Now, a cutscene can have branching moments, but that's literally like cutscene A going to B1 or B2. There's still not any interaction occurring.
Right.
The player is watching.
You're just watching it.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and go over some points on things that you need to focus on writing about and working on during a cutscene.
Well, the first thing is characters.
Yes. Now, we've said this before in our various creator classrooms, our various podcasts, etc. Every character in your game, every single one needs a flushed out background and a personality. Now, the background can be invisible. That means... Exactly.
You don't have to put every detail of a character's background in your game.
Right.
This is for you to know.
Right.
So that you can, in your mind, be referring to this and your writing comes out a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, as you're creating your cutscenes, characters are going to have certain motivations. They're going to do certain things. And you want to have that background to refer to to help push you into why the character is doing whatever.
Yeah.
And it can go in the opposite direction. So if you're writing a scene and you come across a really cool thing that this character can do, protagonist or otherwise, and you don't have a reason for it, but it's a blank within their background. And I've done this a number of times. I'll write this character doing this neat thing, whatever it is. Maybe they have a piece of knowledge on what it is the protagonist is trying to do. And then I put into their background, hey, this fits seamlessly into their background, and I'll write it into their background, and then that may lead to another piece of background that's related to it, and then I can pull that into a scene later. That's
very organic writing.
Yes.
And that's actually a better form of writing than just strictly following an outline.
Well, right. You don't want to be, now this is, when I say you don't want to be, this is my advice as a writer. You don't want to be a pure plotter, where you plot everything out and you're very strict to your outline and you never deviate. But you also don't want to be what we call a pantser.
Oh, yeah, the pantser.
Where everything is off the seat of your pants. You want to kind of find yourself somewhere in the middle where it's that organic via structure. What else we got?
Well, you also, aside from characters, you gotta have a sense of urgency.
Yes.
And I don't mean like urgency, like, oh gosh, it has to happen now.
Right,
no.
The world's going to blow up if we don't do this thing. No.
Right. No. Urgency has to do with an emotional stake.
Right. So you want to approach each scene with that emotional stake, varying in size and scope. So it doesn't always have to be, if we don't act now, the Death Star is going to blow up Yavin. Doesn't always have to be that.
Right.
It can sometimes be as small as, hey, our friend is waiting for us over at the bus stop and they don't have any change for the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really small, but it's still a stake. We're helping a friend. And here's the reason why. If you don't have a sense of urgency in your cutscene, the player's going to slow down.
Yep.
They're going to go, why am I watching this? What's the purpose of this?
And then their mind's going to start wandering.
And wandering can board players, have a habit of putting your game away. But here's the turn, though. Here's the thing. The urgency doesn't have to be plot related. It can be character related.
Indeed.
It could be, for example, a scene between two people, and they're going to go do a quest or a mission. Let's put it in a modern setting.
Yeah, missions.
Yeah, a mission, and one of the characters is like, all right, well, I'll help you with this, but then I have to go to work. He doesn't like, I'm going to be late to work, I'm going to get fired, just I have to go to work. There's some sense of we have to get it done so that X can occur. It's like ending a chapter in your book with just enough of a hook, or I don't want to use using the word cliffhanger, but enough of a hook into the next chapter. It's the same concept.
That is. I like that. That's a really good example.
Yes.
A lot of our cutscenes are built around dialogue.
That is true. A lot of cutscenes are. You can have dialogueless cutscenes. I talked about Limbo. Limbo is a game with not an ounce of dialogue in it, and it has a fantastic narrative. But most of your cutscenes where you're going to do a bulk of writing is going to have dialogue.
Yeah, but most cutscenes that I can recall, it's somebody talking.
Yeah, something. You know, the ones that last more than maybe a couple of seconds. And you do want to focus on good dialogue. You really do.
Yeah.
Instead of realistic dialogue. And let me kind of tell you what the difference is.
Yes.
And this is something that every writer has to go with. I myself have to go with it because I'm like, oh God, I want to write the way people write. Write the way people talk. People don't talk well. Like I just didn't. We do a lot of uhs. We do a lot of ums. We correct ourselves. We go back. We go forth. We go on side tangents.
We use slang and...
Yeah, and we sometimes choose the wrong word, malpropisms,
right.
And just random things that make it really hard to understand what we're saying. I'm a good example because I will ramble and take forever to get to the point. My characters in my games won't. I may be slightly long-winded like a Quentin Tarantino scene, in my game writing, but that's not the same as realistic writing where I'm constantly going back and forth and qualifying and requalifying because you don't want to write your dialogue the way people speak in real life.
Actually, yeah, you don't. It gets especially difficult if you're trying to write the dialect.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Dialects, yes. Very much so. In fact, if you're going to focus on dialects, what you want to do is add as little as possible so the player can fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose a very much stereotype, but you don't have to go stereotypes, guys. Okay, so for example, if you have a "Je mein Doktor," Dr. Frankenstein. You could have him say, instead of "the," have him say "ze," "z." But you only have to do it once or twice.
Just once or twice.
Just once or twice. Every couple of text boxes, maybe throw in a "z" or "und." The player's going to fill in the dialogue in their brains, the dialect.
And if you don't know what dialect writing is, pick up any classic Southern writer.
Oh, yeah.
Tennessee Williams or...
word choice is also really important.
So pick up just to take a look at it.
Yeah. And then again, word choice. Word choice also helps you flush out dialects. So, make sure you have that dialogue well written.
Okay. And also...
Subtext?
Subtext.
Yeah, subtext.
Yeah.
So, subtext is one of those little things that takes practice doing, and you should be practicing as a writer from day one.
Always.
Subtext are those little nuances of characters, little things that come through in their words and their actions that just add their personality to the word choice. And that's why I say word choice is so important. You really need to focus on what word a character is going to choose as much as what it is they're trying to say. Your characters who are highly intellectual are going to choose those 50-cent words.
Every once in a while they'll drop one,
yes. But you don't, not too many.
No.
Not too many. Some characters are going to have a bit of a verbal tick. You don't have to go as bad as, was that Chichiri from
Yashigi?
Who would end every single sentence with "noda."
Noda.
You don't have to be quite that bad, but you want to have that subtext, little nuances, ways they speak, ways that they, like maybe they refer to the protagonist as bra. I mean, something as little as that. That automatically conjures like the bro in the gym, "What's up, bra?" That kind of thing.
Or the Khajiit, who always refers to themselves in the third person.
Yes, Khajiit always does things a good way. Khajiit is not sneaky. Little things like that. The personality of the character will come through in, again, word choice.
So let's switch gears for a bit and switch direction. See what I did there?
Yes, I did.
So direction is all about communication.
Oh, yes.
You need to clearly communicate your game's objective using the characters' voices.
Right. So
you need to give some examples on that, Steele, because that can get real hairy.
So this is going to tie into something later we're going to call momentum, but direction is clearly communicating to the player what it is they need to do. And you don't have to hold their hand. You don't have to be like, go here in order to advance the plot.
Right.
I'm going to reference my favorite game of all time, Skyrim, where you're getting a quest, and they'll say, well, we don't know where this totem is, this item is, but the last time we heard about it, it was somewhere in the Falkreath Hold.
There you go.
That's a lead.
That's a lead. That's direction.
Yeah, something. So now the player knows to head to the Falkreath Hold in order to continue trying to find whatever item they're looking at.
Exactly.
But it was very clearly communicated, and it was communicated in an organic way because the person who's looking for this item has the one lead that they're giving to the Dovahkiin.
Yes.
So, that's something that's very important. And you can get down to the minutia, but it's always better.
You could, but
in my opinion, it's always best if the player feels like they're clever for figuring something out. You want the player to feel smart.
We always say that, but it's perfectly true.
And if you're during a cut scene, if you give them and this is open world, it's a lot easier to do. If you give them a location to go to, and they go to it,
and they explore around that location until they find what they're looking for.
And they're like, I did a smart. If your game is more linear, or more level-based, like a Tomb Raider-style game where they go level 1, level 2, level 3, or Uncharted where you have a cutscene with Scully and the next thing you know, you're off to the next area, then you just want to make sure that during that cutscene with Scully that you indicate why you're going to the next area.
There we go.
Even if it's just, hey, Nathan, we need to go find out where Chloe is.
Yeah.
Just something like that. And this dives into the idea of sequencing.
Yes. You want to make sure that your objectives are clearly laid out. First, second, third, last.
Right. And it's important that the sequence of your objective being laid out versus the text and the flavor and the character building don't overlap in such a way that the player misses the direction.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to stop and go, a character building between Nathan and Scully. Character building between Nathan and Scully. Stop. Okay, Chloe's over there. But you can have it be that while they're talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
You bring an accent, you bring a moment of clarity to the player where Scully goes, the last time we saw Chloe, she was in Indonesia.
Right.
And then Nathan's like, okay. And then as he's leaving, Scully's like, hey, do you still have feelings for Chloe? And he's like, well, yeah, but whatever. And then they move on.
They move on.
So it's near the end of that sequence
Mm-hmm.
is when you have the direction come out. Or you could do it at the beginning. But if you do it in the middle and you're too subtle about it,
They'll miss it.
And they'll be like, why am I going to Indonesia again?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want to avoid player confusion. You want to avoid that. And also speaking of things to avoid
Mm-hmm.
superfluousness.
Yes.
You want to keep up that momentum. So if the dialogue in your scene
Mm-hmm.
doesn't move the story forward, a character forward, or any kind of thread, then cut it.
Just cut it.
Now, what that means is that if your awesome dialogue doesn't build character relationships or build a character's, story
Mm-hmm.
momentum, then it doesn't belong. If it's just two people just rambling. I'm going to bring up Pulp Fiction for a second, then
There
I'm
we
actually
go.
going to go to a video game. The very first scene between Jules and Vinny Vega,
Yeah.
where they're talking about, going to Amsterdam, going to France, Royale with cheese,
Yes,
all
the
that.
Royale with cheese.
That actually establishes rapport between the two characters.
Yeah.
So it's necessary. But if they would have had that later on in the movie, it would have been more of a drag.
Yes, it would have. Because all they were doing was just talking about some random subjects.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All the random banter between them later on in the movie actually is built off of what has happened or what is happening inside of them. So it's a really good example. I love using that one
That is
for
a very good example.
how a scene can appear to be superfluous but actually move something forward very well. Now we're going to truck on over to a game,
Okay.
and we are going to talk about Uncharted 2. That scene where, again, Chloe, one of my favorite characters, meets up with Nathan and they get ready to go for the Shambhala storyline.
Right.
The two of them reference their relationship up to the point I think they actually make love in that scene or post scene. But the thing is during that sequence, even though all they're talking about as far as the plot is going to Shambhala, the rest of their dialogue, and it's a relatively long scene for an Uncharted game, is them coming to terms with the fact that they still have a relationship. Even though they're not technically in one, there's still a tension, a sexual tension between them.
Yeah.
So, this moves them forward. However, for the rest of the game, any comments on the two of them being attracted to each other happen in gameplay, not in cutscene.
Yeah.
So that's important. And as they're moving around the environment.
Yes. So, please don't forget to add your cues.
Yes. Cues for those level designers to utilize. So when you're building a cutscene, this is kind of a jump, but that's okay too. When you're building your script, you're going to have things happening in the environment that your level designers are going to have to do in order to show off a verbal cue. So that could be something along the lines of there's birds up in the tree, and then the conversation reaches a crescendo, and maybe then there's a gunshot off in the distance and the birds fly off. Or, if you want to make it kind of comical, if these characters are having a dialogue sequence, there's birds in the tree, someone says something that's going to anger or surprise one of the characters that's known for having a temper. Yeah. That character screams, "What?" And then the birds scatter. So you want to put those environmental cues in there, and you put them like in little brackets or little parentheses, birds are in trees chirping happily, blah, 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 blah. Oh, this character did this, character 2, "What?" And then in parentheses, birds fly off. So that way, if you're not the level designer, then your level designer will know, okay, I got to insert a little bit of animation here. Or if you're the level designer, you can go back and reference your script later and go, oh yeah,
I need birds.
I need birds. So this is all cutscene related. Everything we just talked about is
it's all
cutscenes.
for cutscenes.
Cutscenes. The rules change ever so much, but at the same time slightly when you're doing in-game play. And what I mean by that is you now have to go with, while the player is playing, something is happening, words are being spoken, the environment is reacting, all these things are occurring at the same time. So you still want to have things like subtext. You still want to have the personality of the characters come out.
Yes.
You still want to have that sense of urgency. You want to have good dialogue. You don't want to break that. But what you don't want to do is stop the action during a in-game scene, because at that point it's a cutscene.
Yeah, and that's, you don't want to have a whole game of cutscenes.
Yeah. Now we have some things here to touch on.
Yeah, the first one is clarity.
Oh yeah.
And I cannot stress enough that clarity in your in-play scenes in your game is so very important. Every piece of information you deliver to the player has got to be clearly presented.
Right. They have to understand what it is that they're hearing and why it's important. Even if it just moves a character's motivation, a character's personality forward. A good example is Uncharted 2. In Uncharted 2, it's obvious that Nathan likes Chloe's derriere. And there's a sequence where they're climbing up a ladder and he makes a comment about that, and it just shows that he's really attracted to her. There's still a lot of strong tension between the two of them, and her response is that she enjoys it. So this right here moves forward this tension between their relationship, and the reason this is built up is at the end of the game when Nathan kind of drops Chloe for I think it was Sarah, I forgot her name, the blonde. It shows that even though there's this tension between Nathan and Chloe and they're really attracted to each other, he has feelings for this other woman.
Right.
And it builds that up, and it's very well done because you kind of like, hey, I want to ship these two characters, but they're not the canon relationship.
Right.
So.
I got another example, though, a different example for clarity, and that's in Skyrim when you talk to the innkeeper that is outside of the first barrow that you go to. The innkeeper actually tells you a little bit about the barrow. Yeah. As kind of a prep, a warning for you.
Yes.
What to expect when you go inside this place.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that scene is split up between him and his sister.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Him and his sister are talking back and forth. They're including you in the conversation, of course, as the player, but they're talking back and forth about what kind of creatures are in there and what happened to the last person that went inside there.
Yeah. And then when the sister actually walks you to the edge of Riverwood, she's still talking. She's still giving you more information so that you very clearly know where you're going and what you're doing. Yeah. And the reason this is important is because that is the first dungeon of the main quest.
Yes, it is.
You have to get that dragon stone and get that first word wall.
You have to.
In order to become the Dovahkiin, or recognized as one. So that clarity is very, very important. Be clear. Don't be vague in an in-game cutscene. Don't use, if you want to use metaphors of the bad guy saying, and thus the world will be cast into the shadows of oblivion, that's fine. All you're doing there is you're building up that the bad guy is full of himself, highly confident, a jerk that speaks in metaphors. And if you're writing the in-game sequence for that, it's fine. You're doing it right. But if you're trying to impart information from the bad guy,
that's not the way to do it.
That's not the way to do it.
No. And along with clarity, brevity.
Oh yeah.
Use as few words as possible.
Yes, to get your point across. Yeah. Just don't linger on it.
Word salad is not appropriate here.
You should never have the La Habrea level of chatting and monologuing. You should not go into syndrome level BS.
No.
Referencing The Incredibles, I just did. You need to be brief no matter what, but you especially need to be brief with an in-play sequence, because a player is going to be splitting their attention amongst multiple things during the course of a game.
That's right.
They're going to be splitting their attention between controlling their character, your environment, so that they can pick up on environment or audio cues, anything that enemies are doing, whether it be an RPG, an FPS, a survival horror, it's irrelevant. They're going to be doing all of that. And if you're asking them to do all of that while listening to information being given by a long-winded NPC, you're actually harming their ability to play your game correctly.
You're taking them out of the action, and that does so much to break their concentration and momentum.
Yeah, and you don't want to do that.
No.
You don't want to do that. That is why, even if you're like riding around in a GTA-style game and you're having the news report on the radio, keep it succinct enough that they're able to understand what is being said. And both GTA and Saints Row do this. you'll have the newscaster say something, and it'll be like a sentence or two. Then there'll be a pause, and it may be a nice pregnant pause, a nice 2, 3, 4, 5-second pause. Then the newscaster will continue, and you can use those moments to keep the conversation, to keep the dialogue brief.
Yes.
Instead of, from here for the next 30 seconds, I'm going to give you information when you should be driving your car. I've played games like that, and I've just pulled over to the side and let the damn radio newscaster just talk.
In Fallout 3, the DJ would give about a 5-second report that was basically tracking your movements, what a major milestone you accomplished.
Oh, yeah.
And then it would play music. It'd play a song.
Yeah. And then maybe later on they would continue to, especially Two Dog in Fallout 3. He did that really well. As you went through the main quest, you get those little updates.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And finally, you got to have relatability.
Yes.
That's got to stay. That's got to stay. Every single line.
Every action.
Everything.
You have to keep up all those empathy connections.
All of them. You do not want this superfluous, characterless, toneless conversation in an in-game cutscene.
Nope.
So character voice is super duper important when doing an in-play scene.
Can you imagine going up to an innkeeper, and the innkeeper just stood there staring out and went, "There was something in the dungeon. Yeah, it was pretty bad."
Going to Skyrim, there's actually a fantastic character that only gives a couple of lines, and that's the guy you save from the giant frost spider. And he's a bandit.
Yeah.
He's got I believe he's got the golden claw on him, and you free him, and he's like, "Haha, like I would share the treasure with you," and then he runs off, and he makes 1 or 2 lines taunting you, and then he gets killed by a Draugr. Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
That is a fantastic bit of in-game dialogue that shows that this guy is a skeezer who has basically scammed his way through life. He was caught by a spider and was like, help me, help me, help me, a coward.
Right.
And then he ran off. Now that he's free, haha, I'm going to do my own thing. And he dies a coward, skeezy death.
Yeah.
That just tiny, like 1 or 2 lines. And it just gave you so much about this guy.
And the fact that you're talking about him means that he's memorable.
Yeah. So you
this
want that.
minor character that only shows up that one little time in the entire game.
That's right.
And we remember him.
And you remember him. So that is what you want to do. You want to have that kind of an impact when you write your character dialogue.
Yeah.
All right. So now it's time for us to take questions from our live audience.
If you've been watching, remember to use that podcast question feature in our chat.
We have a very good live chat. They usually hit with the good questions, so we'll see what they slap us with this time.
Well, this is a really interesting topic that you can do a deep dive on and split it up into many different elements. As you were talking about technical writing, there's also dev writing as well.
Yeah, actually writing the GDD, writing the nuances of the scenes that are from a narrative standpoint, not a dialogue standpoint. All that has to be there, in your dialogue script and your game script.
We're just focusing on looking at a top-down approach to
writing a scene. Yeah. And that's actually a good thing there. If you guys in chat want to see us do a deep dive into, or the VOD people, if you want to listen to us do a deeper dive into technical aspect of writing, or you want to have us go into the what was the other writing topic? I kind of forgot.
Dev writing.
Revisions, dev revisions, dev editing. That's another important one that we could do a deeper dive into.
We could, yeah.
Character voice. We could do a deep dive into character voice.
Yes. Very important.
If you're in live chat, even though we're not monitoring it, if you put it down, we'll see it after the podcast is over. Let us know if any of that interests you.
Yeah.
We could make that one of our topics for the future.
We can make that work.
All right, we do have a question.
This is from Burke. I know you didn't focus too much on the technical part, but on the make it feel right as a narrative part. But how do you feel in using scripts and storyboards prior to running into the Unreal Sequencer, for example?
Okay, so for example, the Unreal Sequencer. You should have a script. You should have a game script.
Yes, you should.
And your game script can incorporate your dialogue script, but it's not the same thing. Your game script is the narrative of the game as the player goes through it. That includes both environmental narration, character action narration, like the Dovahkiin gets the Dragonstone,
right,
as well as including the dialogue. So absolutely do a script. And a storyboard, 100%. I am 100% behind
storyboards. Really, really help your level designers. Seriously.
Yes. Level designers, people who are making cinema, if you're using an engine with cinema, like the Unreal Engine. It's just in general, I storyboard, and by storyboard, I mean words, not drawings, because I can't sketch for crap. I storyboard my books.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have, here's what happens each chapter by chapter, and then I move sequences around like with little post-it notes on a cork board, and sometimes I got to move those sequences to get things to work a little better. Or I use my favorite online tool is Evernote.
Yes, Evernote.
Because I can slide those around. You can even do it in a Trello board. Use Trello to sequence out your scenes, all that stuff. So yeah, even though we're not going deep dive into the technical, Burke, absolutely, and everyone listening, use the scripting and storyboard tools that you can use to plot your stuff out. And just remember, be organic. If it feels right when you're writing it, and it's not 100% on your notes, deviate. See where it takes you.
See where it takes you.
The worst thing you ever have to do as a writer is delete what you wrote and write something else. And honestly, that is so minor. That's tiny, tiny, tiny. I would rather delete my entire manuscript and start over than publish something that's full of ass.
Yeah, or have to write yourself out of a corner.
Yeah, don't do that. I'm going to go on a tangent in case anyone else has any other questions. Steel tangent incoming.
Oh, here we go.
Do not attempt to write yourself out of a corner. So if you're writing your game script, your dialogue, your narrative, etc., and suddenly you find yourself into a corner, don't try to continue to write things, especially if you're pulling stuff out of your butt, to try to fix it. Instead, go back and find where that point is where you started writing yourself into the corner. That's part of revision. It takes time. It takes skill. It takes doing it over and over again until you get it right. But you'll find that break point. You will find that point in your story where you're like, shit, I wrote myself into a corner and it started here. And then from there, assess how you can stop that from happening, delete everything you just wrote, and start writing it again.
Yeah.
That is the way to do it. Don't write yourself out of a corner. Keep yourself from going into one, even if you have to delete what you already wrote. All right, I don't see any more podcast questions. We'll give it just another minute or two.
Yeah.
As a dev editor, do you have any tips on writing these sequences, scenes, etc.? Anything you want to give?
Well, my biggest tip is organization.
Right.
The one of the few things that I've run into over and over again in dev editing is just disorganized writing.
Oh yeah.
Where the topic is, it jumps from topic to topic, or from focus to focus, or it jumps between too many characters, point of views, and that's all part of organization, and that's what I run into. So use the tools that Steele told you about to keep yourself organized, and don't be afraid to cut. Don't be afraid of the red line.
Yeah, don't.
The red line is your friend, because the red line keeps you from being mediocre.
Teal put it best to me years ago when I was getting involved in my foray into novel writing. And she said it best. She said, don't fear the delete key, embrace it.
Yeah.
And it's true. It actually saved me a lot of headache. The sooner the sooner you're no longer afraid of deleting your work, the sooner you're going to become a better writer.
Oh, yes.
We do have another question.
Oh, here we go. This is from Moogle Rampage.
Okay.
Dialect consistency has been tough for me. Do you have a preferred approach? I'm thinking maybe a style guide.
Writing a style guide would be interesting. It is something that would take work on anyone's. I don't have a style guide that I reference, but creating one or finding one and referencing it on our Discord would definitely help. My particular approach to writing dialogue consistency is...
That's dialect consistency.
Did I say dialogue?
You said dialogue, but it's dialect. Yeah.
Dialect consistency. So my approach to dialect consistency is to write the lines and then read them out loud in the character's voice with as horrible a slang as I possibly can.
That is what I do as well.
Yeah.
Read what you wrote out loud.
Yeah.
Okay. If it sounds like the character that what you're going for, great. If it doesn't, get back in there and revise.
Recently there was a game jam and I worked with a team. In fact, I actually worked with Moogle and a few others. And we made a game called Dracula's Dead, and I was the writer for that, and we had a large cast of characters, and each one had a different dialect. And for each one, when I wrote it, I then took a step back and I read the line out loud. So for Dr. Frankenstein, I was talking like the doctor. For the Skeleton Guru, I had a Cockney accent. All right, Governor, I don't exactly know where we're going. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Each one I had, and I mean, I can't read off like a little girl, so for the little ghost character, I just, I gotta raise my voice and just talk like that. And I sounded dorky as hell, but it helped me to understand the dialect of the characters.
Right.
And that's what I do. So that may or may not work for everyone, but it definitely works for me. And honestly, guys, if you are writing dialogue, you need to get in the habit of reading it out loud while you're editing it, because you're going to catch so many mistakes on how it sounds, whether it sounds good as opposed to realistic, spelling errors, all the spelling errors, all the grammar errors ever. Whenever you read your dialogue out loud, you're going to catch so many problems before you send them to the game engine or whatnot.
Another thing, another thing that may help you, it's all part of a research, is having a reference.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mentioned earlier, for a Southern accent, for a Southern character, read some Southern writers. That's another way to get a feel for how it should be done. Yeah,
absolutely. Also, we have the internet now. So watch videos of people speaking in the dialect you're trying to create.
Yes.
You want to create a stereotyped German Doktor. Watch videos of people talking like that. Watch that and see how they sound. Anytime you're writing, if you're able to reference something that you can see in real life or something that you can read, it's going to be so much easier to replicate it into writing. And don't be afraid of that. Every writer ever references something else in order to get inspiration. Yeah. So don't be afraid like you're stealing. You're not stealing, you're learning.
Actually, there's a movie, it's called Gone with the Wind.
Oh, yeah.
And several of the actors or actresses in there do emulate a very good Southern accent.
Yes.
For example, Olivia de Havilland, who played Melanie Hamilton.
Oh, my goodness.
She did it right. She had a good Southern accent without being over the top with it.
Right. It wasn't.
And she used Southern colloquialisms in her dialogue.
She was amazing in that movie. It was actually funny. A quick side comment to see while we're waiting if there's any other questions. Clark Gable did not.
No, he refused.
Because he did not want to play that character.
Exactly.
So he was like, I'm not going to talk in a Southern accent, which is why he sounds like the yankiest South Carolinian ever.
Yeah.
Ever. But, I mean, that was a thing back then.
Yeah, right.
But Melanie's actress absolutely nails a Southern accent
she does,
in that movie. So watch stuff. Read stuff. Expose yourself to it. I come from New Orleans. I have a New Orleans accent, which is none. We do not talk like people from Southern Louisiana. We talk like this. That's how it is, So expose yourself to other things.
The 12 Yats of Christmas.
Hush.
Okay.
Besides, that's the crawfish we count an Arabi. Okay. Do we have any more questions? As if not, we're going to go ahead and call it out because this has been a real good one. I love it whenever we tackle writing topics because it's something near and dear to my heart. But I can't stress it enough. Writing is a ton of work.
Yes, it is.
It is a ton of work. Most of the work is not in the drafting, though. Most of the work's not in the writing.
It's in the revising.
Yes. And we did a creator classroom on revising, which highly recommend you watch. And maybe we'll kind of revisit the higher level of it in a podcast sometime.
Maybe sometime, yeah. But definitely that classroom we did was a deep dive into dev writing.
Yeah, it's rough stuff. All right, so it looks like we are done, and I want to give a shout out to our live audience, our live chat for listening to us. We will scan the chat lines later to any comments or suggestions for future topics.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
And we want to give a shout out to anyone listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, etc., etc., etc. It's people like yourself that make DLC Not Included successful.
Yes, and thank you.
We do. We love you guys very much. And join us next time for DLC Not Included. And remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.